When my Uncle Ray passed away last winter, I didn't expect to inherit anything, certainly not his cabin out by Whisper Lake. He'd lived like a ghost the last few years, refusing to come to holidays, never answering calls. My mom said the isolation got to him, so when the lawyer told me the cabin was mine, I figured a weekend up there might do me some good. No classes, no phone service, no constant noise. Just me, my dog Cooper, and the quiet. It was late Friday when I turned off the highway and started up the dirt road. The trees closed in like a tunnel, branches scraping the roof of my car. The air had that sharp pine smell that hits your lungs and makes you feel alive. Cooper sat in the passenger seat, head out the window, tail thumping. When I finally pulled into the clearing, the place looked exactly like I remembered it from childhood, except older. The porch sagged. The shutters hung crooked. The lake beyond it was still and black, like it was swallowing the last of the daylight. "Home sweet home," I muttered. Cooper barked once, like he agreed. Inside smelled like dust and wood smoke. Everything was frozen in time. Uncle Ray's fishing jacket on the peg, his boots by the door, a coffee cup still on the table with a ring of brown at the bottom. I started a fire and spread my sleeping bag out on the old couch. As the flames flickered across the room, I stared at the framed photos on the wall, Ray holding up huge fish, standing beside that same aluminum boat down by the dock. He looked happy in those pictures. So why had he shut himself away here? By the time I realized how quiet it was, the fire had burned low. The woods outside felt heavy, like they were listening. That's when I heard it. 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock. Cooper's head shot up, ears perked, a low growl rumbling from his throat. I sat up, heart pounding. The sound had come from the porch, or near it. "Probably just a branch," I whispered, but I didn't believe it. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out onto the porch. The cold hit me like a slap. My breath hung white in the beam of the light as I swept it across the clearing. Nothing. Then I saw them, footprints, bare feet, human, pressed deep into the frost. They led from the porch steps out into the woods and stopped. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the trees. No answer. I went back inside fast, bolted the door, and sat up the rest of the night with Cooper curled at my feet, every creak in the cabin setting my nerves on edge. By morning, I tried convincing myself it was nothing. Maybe a hunter had gotten lost. Maybe kids messing around. I grabbed a rod from the wall and decided to take the boat out. The fog rolled low over the lake, thick and silvery. The water was calm enough to mirror the trees, and for a while it felt peaceful. Cast, real cast. The rhythm settled me. I even started humming to myself. Then Cooper barked. He was standing on the dock, staring across the lake. "What is it, boy?" I squinted through the mist. That's when I saw someone. A figure between the trees on the far shore, tall, thin, unmoving, watching. I blinked and the fog thickened. When it cleared again, they were gone. That night, I made sure every window was locked. Still, when the fire died down and the woods went still again, the knocking came back. 3 knocks. Pause. Then 3 more. I froze. Cooper growled deep in his chest. I grabbed the old hunting rifle from above the fireplace, Ray's I assumed, and aimed it at the door. "Who's there?" I shouted. The knocking stopped. For a second, there was only the sound of my heart hammering. Then a voice, calm, too calm, drifted in from the darkness. "You shouldn't have come here." My blood went cold. "Who are you?" I yelled, a long pause. Then, almost in a whisper, "Uncle Ray said no visitors." I stumbled backward, shaking so hard I could barely hold the gun. How did he know Ray? How did he know me? I stayed, awake until morning, every muscle locked tight. The next day I tried to leave, but when I popped the hood on my truck, my stomach dropped. The battery was gone. Someone had ripped it out. I stood there staring at the empty space, a pit opening in my gut. Whoever had been outside last night wasn't some lost hiker. They were playing with me. That afternoon, I decided to hike out toward the main road, 5 miles, maybe 6. I packed a few things, took the rifle, and whistled for Cooper. The woods were colder now, darker even though it was midday. Every sound felt amplified, the crunch of my boots, the wind through dead branches. Half a mile in, I stopped. Something was hanging from a tree ahead. It was a hat, faded, brown, familiar. My uncle's fishing hat. Beneath it, nailed to the bark, was a Polaroid photo. It showed me, sleeping on the couch inside the cabin. My stomach flipped. I tore it down, shoving it into my pocket, scanning the trees. "Come on, Coop," I whispered, my voice shaking. "We're getting the hell out of here." We started moving fast. Every few steps, I swore I heard footsteps behind us, just out of sync with mine. By the time we reached the clearing by the lake, the sun was low, shadows stretching long across the ground. That's when Cooper barked, once sharp and then yelped. "Cooper!" I spun around. No sign of him. Only ripples spreading across the shallows. His leash lay tangled in the reeds, but the dog was gone. "Cooper!" I shouted again. Then I saw movement in the water. A man stood waist-deep in the lake. His clothes were soaked, clinging to him, his hair matted over his face. He smiled, slow and wide. "You should have listened to Ray," he said, voice soft and even. "He tried to warn you." I raised the rifle, but before I could aim, he dropped under the surface without a splash. I waited, seconds, minutes, I don't know. The water went still again. I ran. When I reached the cabin, the sky was bleeding into night. I slammed the door shut, jammed a chair under the handle, and sat against the wall with the rifle pointed at it. Every sound made me flinch, the ticking of the wood stove, the crackle of the fire. Then I heard it, a scraping sound. From above, the ceiling hatch to the attic trembled slightly. I stared up, throat tight. The scraping grew louder, closer, like something was crawling across the boards. My hands were shaking so bad the gun barrel rattled. "Stay away from me," I shouted. A pause. Then, laughter, low, breathy, right above me. I bolted for the door, tore it open, and ran into the woods. Branches whipped my face, roots caught my feet, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just ran. I don't remember much after that, just flashes, the moonlight flickering through the trees, the sound of something moving behind me, always keeping pace. When the sheriff's deputies finally found the cabin 3 days later, they said it looked like someone had been living there. They found food wrappers, muddy footprints, a bedroll hidden in the attic. They also found something nailed to the inside of the door. A Polaroid. It showed me, standing in the woods, looking over my shoulder, and behind me, half hidden in the trees, was a figure smiling wide enough to split his face in two. I wasn't supposed to stay the night. The plan was simple: drive up to the old hunting cabin, clean it out for the realtor, and head back before dark. But by the time I finished clearing the debris, the road had iced over and the nearest town was 30 miles away. So I stayed. I told myself it was fine. The cabin belonged to my grandfather, and I'd been there as a kid. Back then, it had seemed enormous, like a fortress in the woods. Now it just felt small and wrong. The air smelled of damp wood and rot. The furniture was coated in dust thick enough to leave fingerprints in. I built a fire, sat in one of the old armchairs, and tried not to think about how far I was from anyone else. By 9 o'clock, snow started to fall, big, silent flakes drifting through the beams of my flashlight. The woods outside looked like a black sea swallowing everything beyond the front porch. I found an old lantern in the corner, brass, heavy, still half full of fuel. I set it on the table and lit it, just in case the fire went out during the night. Its flame flickered and threw soft shadows that shifted with every gust of wind. I tried reading an old magazine I found, but the words wouldn't stick. My mind kept wandering back to something strange I'd noticed earlier: footprints. They weren't mine. When I'd arrived, there'd been a single set leading around the side of the cabin and vanishing into the woods. They looked recent. I told myself they were from hunters, or maybe a hiker. But now, sitting there alone, I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever made them hadn't gone very far. At some point, I dozed off in the chair. When I woke, the fire was nearly out and the cabin was dark except for the glow of the lantern. For a moment, I didn't know what had woken me. Then I heard it. Someone was walking on the porch. The boards creaked under their weight. One step, then another, then silence. My throat tightened. I sat perfectly still, listening. Then came a knock, soft, polite, almost gentle. 3 times. I didn't move. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. Nothing. The knock came again, louder. I grabbed the lantern and edged closer to the door. Through the tiny window I could see the snow still falling, but no one stood outside. The footprints on the porch were fresh, though, bare feet pressed deep into the snow. My chest felt tight. I backed away, whispering to myself, "You're just tired. You're hearing things." I turned toward the table and froze. The lantern flickered violently. The light dimmed, then flared back up. throwing wild shapes across the walls. For a moment I thought I saw a shadow that didn't belong, something tall near the far corner of the room. But when I blinked, it was gone. I shut and locked every window, threw more wood on the fire, and sat there gripping the lantern like a lifeline. Time crawled. The clock on the wall had stopped at midnight. I must have sat there for hours, staring into the shadows, waiting for dawn. But then I noticed something outside the window. A light, faint and yellow, like another lantern swinging between the trees. It moved slowly through the snow, weaving back and forth. At first I felt relief. Maybe someone had gotten stuck too. Maybe they needed help. I went to the window and wiped the frost away. The lantern was closer now, swaying rhythmically. Then it stopped, and whoever was holding it lifted it higher. I saw a face in the glow, pale, expressionless, eyes black as coal. It was watching me. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The face vanished. The light went out. Everything was dark again except for the weak flicker of my own lantern. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. I thought about grabbing the rifle from the wall, but it wasn't loaded. My grandfather's old habits. That's when the footsteps started again. They moved from the porch, around the side of the cabin, slow and deliberate. I crept to the back window, holding the lantern high. My breath fogged the glass. There was no one there, but the footsteps kept circling. Closer, closer. Then they stopped. And from the woods, 30 feet away, my lantern's glow reflected off another. The same one I had seen before. It wasn't being held anymore. It was hanging from a branch, swaying gently, and beneath it, barely visible in the snow, was a figure. It was standing perfectly still, head tilted, facing the cabin. I whispered, "Please, no." The lantern inside my hand flickered and went out. Darkness swallowed the room. I could hear the wind in my pulse, and then something else. Breathing. Right outside the window, I froze. Every instinct screamed not to look, but my eyes drifted toward the sound. Through the thin pane, just inches from my face, two eyes stared back, wide, unblinking. I dropped the lantern and ran. The door resisted for a second before bursting open, the night air slicing my face. I bolted into the woods, snow up to my knees, the cold burning my lungs. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Away from that cabin, from that thing. Behind me, I heard the creak of the porch again. Then a voice, soft, calm, too close. "Don't run, you'll get lost." I didn't stop. I ran until my legs gave out and the world tilted sideways. When I woke, it was daylight. My hands were numb, my clothes stiff with frost. The woods were empty, no footprints except mine. The cabin was gone. I swear it. I searched for hours, stumbling through trees I should have known like the back of my hand. No clearing, no building, just forest. They found me 3 days later, wandering along the road, half frozen and babbling about a lantern in the trees. The police said there was no record of any cabin on that land. My grandfather had died 30 years ago, and his property had burned down long before I was born. But when I finally got my phone back, there was one photo in my camera roll I don't remember taking. It was me, standing in the snow. Behind me, hanging from a branch, was a lantern, and next to it, someone smiling. I had planned the weekend as an escape from everything. Work had been suffocating, my friends were distant, and the city had started feeling like a cage. A remote cabin listed online promised exactly what I needed: isolation, a lake, and nothing but the sounds of the forest. I arrived just before sunset. The cabin was smaller than the listing had made it seem, but sturdy, dark wood and stone built to last generations. The lake sat a few hundred yards away, smooth and black in the fading light. I parked the rental car in a small clearing and carried in my backpack. Inside, it smelled faintly of mildew and old wood. A single lamp hung from the ceiling, its bulb flickering. I set my pack down, flicked the switch, and the lamp buzzed, throwing uneven light across the floorboards. I had brought a few supplies: a thermos of coffee, a pack of trail mix, a journal, and my phone. The signal was weak, barely enough to text my sister that I had arrived safely. I told myself I wouldn't need anyone else. By the time I made a small fire in the stove, night had fallen completely. Snow had started, light at first, then heavier, the flakes drifting silently to the ground. The lake disappeared under a sheet of mist that rolled in from the water. I tried to focus on reading my journal, but my mind kept wandering to the fog outside. It moved unnaturally, curling between the trees, thickening in patches. I told myself it was just the wind. Then I heard it. At first, I thought I imagined it. The woods can play tricks, I reasoned. But the sound repeated, slow and deliberate, circling the cabin. I froze. My eyes darted to the windows. No one was there. But the snow showed faint footprints, too large for my boots, bare feet pressed into the soft layer of snow. They began at the tree line, moving close to the cabin, then vanishing near the front door. My heart started to hammer. I had considered this cabin safe, but suddenly the isolation felt suffocating. I backed away from the windows and tried to convince myself it was someone lost. Then came a knock. Not the front door. The side of the cabin, near the small storage shed. I swallowed hard. "Hello?" I called. My voice sounded tiny in the vast darkness. The knock came again, louder, more insistent. I grabbed a flashlight, trying to steady my shaking hands. The beam swept across the snow, landing on nothing. The fog swallowed everything beyond a few feet. I considered leaving. I even thought about running back to the car, but the snow had started falling harder, covering tracks. If I went outside, I'd be disoriented before I made it 20 feet. I sat back down near the stove, trying to calm my mind. That's when I noticed the fog, not outside the cabin, but creeping in. It was faint at first, a thin haze sliding under the door, curling around the floorboards. Then it thickened. It moved like water, slow and purposeful. My stomach dropped. I leaned closer to the stove, trying to convince myself it was just smoke from the fire. But the smell was wrong. Damp, earthy, rotten. I thought about calling someone, but my phone had no signal. The cabin was completely isolated. I could hear the snow hitting the roof, the occasional groan of old timber, and that soft hiss moving closer. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath, and the lamp flickered again, struggling to stay lit. The fog was thicker now, curling around the legs of the furniture. I forced myself to stand, flashlight in hand. Every step made the floorboards creak, echoing too loudly in the silent cabin. I moved toward the door, planning to step outside just enough to see where the fog came from. I opened the door. Snow whipped inside, and the fog seemed to pull back slightly, retreating toward the woods. My eyes scanned the tree line. Nothing, just white, gray, and black. The footprints were gone. Then I heard it, a whisper. It wasn't words, not exactly. More like a sound of air vibrating in a shape too familiar to be natural. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The fog began moving again, rolling closer to the cabin like water over rocks. It gathered near the front door, curling in patterns that felt deliberate, aware. I could see shapes in it, almost human, but they dissipated when I blinked. I backed away, scanning the cabin for a weapon. Nothing practical, just a fire poker and a kitchen knife. I grabbed the knife, holding it like a shield, my hands trembling. Then I heard the door handle jiggle. Someone, or something, was trying to open it. I pressed myself against the far wall, trying not to breathe too loudly. The handle stopped moving. I held still. Seconds felt like hours. Then came another knock, hard this time. I had to think. Panic was clouding my mind. My eyes went to the lantern still on the table. I grabbed it and held it high, hoping light would drive whatever it was back. The fog paused just at the threshold, and then, without warning, it surged forward. I screamed, swinging the lantern. The fog swirled violently, and I could hear the soft, wet sound of something moving just beyond it. I ran to the stove, throwing a log on the fire, and for a moment, the light pushed back the darkness. I don't know how long I sat there, holding the knife, the fog pressing at the edges of the firelight. Every sound, the groan of wood, the hiss of fog, the whispering, made my skin crawl. By morning, the fog had retreated. The snow covered the tracks, and everything seemed calm, almost normal. I didn't wait to see if it would return. I packed my things, leaving the lantern and the stove behind, and drove off the frozen road, hands white on the wheel. I haven't returned. I don't plan to. But sometimes, when the wind is right, I swear I can hear that hiss just at the edge of a memory. And I remember the fog curling under the door, moving like it had a mind of its own.